100. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. The word of God for the people of God. Who are we? I want to focus primarily on verse 3 of Psalm 100. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. He has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. I want to talk about three things today. I want to talk about formation, transformation, and translation. I want to talk about, first of all, who are we in our formation. That means that God has formed us, right? He's shaped us, and we've read the account. I'm sure you have in Genesis that he made us in his image. Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them, that we are made in the image of God. And of course, God is spirit. So we are made in that image, is that spiritual image of God. He formed and shaped us. Created us, as the theologian said, ex nihilo, means out of nothing. That he spoke us into existence. That he made us in his image, and being in his image makes us special. You know that? Some people would have you to believe, some naturalists and people who deny the existence of God would have you to believe that the only difference between you and a dog or a tiger is that you got more intelligence. But let me tell you, there's a whole lot of difference, because you are made in the image of God, and being made in the image of God gives you a dignity, and that's where your dignity, and that's why you are special. That, if there's one thing human beings, generally know when we have a right thinking mind, is that, that there's a certain dignity to our being. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because God has formed us. That we are special among all of his creatures that he has created. God will come down and talk with Adam and Eve in the cool of the garden, right? And spend time with them. He did this because they needed it. Adam needed to spend time with God. If someone once said that whatever something is created from, it has to feed on that to survive. That our bodies were made from the earth. And so we feed on earthly things for our bodies to survive. But our spirits were created in the image of God. And our spirits can't survive on earthly things. Our spirits need that which comes from God. Jesus, you remember in Jesus, he quoted that when he was being tempted by the devil. He quoted Deuteronomy chapter 8, which I'm going to read to you, Deuteronomy 8:3. He quoted a portion of it anyway. But this is what Deuteronomy 8:3 says. So he humbled you, saying that God, he humbled the people. He allowed you to hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That we are created and we are formed and shaped in God's image. Therefore, earthly things cannot give us ultimate satisfaction. And people, do themselves great damage by trying, right? Whether you try to satisfy a bodily urge, or you try to do it by financial gain and increase to make us feel like I'm all right. Earthly things don't have the ability to do for us what we ultimately need, because what we ultimately need is spiritual, and it can only come from God. For the writer of Ecclesiastes, Solomon was very wealthy in his time, and by the time he wrote Ecclesiastes, one of his catchphrases was vanity of vanity, right? And he was talking about vanity. He wasn't talking about that old school chair and mirror that people sat at, and ladies sat at and fixed themselves up real pretty. His vanity, he was talking about meaningless, the futility of trying to be all right in life without God, trying to let earthly things satisfy our spiritual being. It just can't do it. You know, earthly things, air conditioning can make my body feel cool. But I mean, for me to have real joy and satisfaction and fulfillment, it's going to have to come from a spiritual place, and that is from God. Ecclesiastes 5:10, Solomon said, "He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity." He said it's meaningless. He had a way of saying things. He said it's like chasing after the wind. You try to grab a hold of it and you just can't. And so often in our lives we're tempted to try to grab a hold of true satisfaction and ultimate fulfillment from things, from the things of this world, from material things, whether, like I said, whether it's satisfying our desires or financial gain. You're trying to let those things make us everything. We just make life right. And it's like chasing after the wind. You can't grab a hold of it because it's not designed to do for you what you need to have done, because you are created in the image of God, and only that which flows out of God can bring you ultimate satisfaction. Amen? He made us in his image. He formed us, our formation. He made us in his image so that we could represent him on the earth. That's why God made us in his image. Nobody walks up to the lion after he pulls down a wildebeest and says, "That's not very godly." But people will always say, if we do something that is morally wrong, that's not godly. You're supposed to be a Christian, because God made us to represent him in the world. We are created in his image. We are the ones that are supposed to represent righteousness and uprightness and holiness and goodness and forgiveness. It's supposed to be us. We are created to represent God's interest in the earth. That's what God created man, put him in that garden, represent me, and then something went terribly wrong. Something went terribly wrong. Man sinned, and the image of God in him was marred. And sometimes today is even almost unrecognizable. You know, the image of God is still there, but sometimes you look and you let somebody look like they ain't got God nowhere in them. So many things mar that image of God in us. And the result of that sin is that man's relationship with God was broken. He formed us to have a relationship with him. He would come and he would spend time with Adam so that because you need me, because man shall not live by bread alone. And that relationship was broken. And in verse 8 of Genesis 3, it says that Adam and Eve heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. They needed him, but their sin made them so uncomfortable in his presence, they began to run from him. Now listen to me, guys. Ever since then, people have attempted to find the fullness of life somewhere other than God. This has led to all types of heartaches and addictions, crime, and tragedies, because people are trying to find fullness of life and satisfaction, that abundant life that our soul still hungers for. Trying to find it somewhere other than God, because we can't find it in God, because the relationship is broken. I'm guilty before him, and I can't get it from him, because every time he comes close, I move away. Are you with me? All of us have experienced that. All of us have experienced that. And even though our relationship with God is broken, the principle of God still stands. Man shall not live by bread alone. Right? I can run from him, right? And I can be uncomfortable around the presence of, I don't like God and God talk, but I still can't experience the fullness of life apart from his word. right? I can deny his existence, but I still need his word for it to have the fullness of life. And I still have a hunger for it, and so I'm going to chase for it in some other way. Never getting there. As Solomon said, like trying to grab a hold of the wind. Like trying to grab a hold of the wind. And Satan is almost like he can dangle that satisfaction that people chase, and he dangles it, and they chase it, and they chase it into all kind of degradation and all kind of bondages and all kinds of things, until finally he gets us to chase it right off the cliff. Are you hearing me? We need God, but our sin made us not want him. He formed us and shaped us and created us in his image, and he put us in the earth to represent him, and he promised to come and give us his word so that we could have life. Isn't that what Jesus promised when he came to fix things up? He said, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly, because that's what you're looking for. If there's one thing a Christian should know about anybody in the world, no matter how much they smile, how satisfied they say they are, they do not have the abundant life that deep in their soul they long for. Because you can't get that without Christ. Yes. And you have nothing else to say. You just keep picking at the fact that Christ can give you that satisfaction deep in your heart. Because you know that a person, if they ever get real with themselves, they'll have to admit to themselves, I don't have it. Because you know it only comes from Christ. Amen? So people chase it. We need him, but our sin has made us not want him. As Jesus said, John 1:10 and 11 says of Jesus, he was in the world. The world was made through him. And the world did not know him. He came to his own did not receive him. We need him, but our sin makes us not want him. Terrible problem. He formed us, shaped us, made us in his image. Something went terribly wrong. We sinned, and our sin deprives us of the thing we need the most. And so what God offers us is the second thing I told you I want to talk to you about, is transformation. Transformation, right? That he would change us. That he would make us into something new, which was really what we were meant to be. That he would transform us and turn us back into what we originally were supposed to be. See, one of the worst things that could have happened to us is that God would have given us over to our sinful passions. That's one of the worst things that could happen to a person, is that God just lets you have your way. Because if I could have my way with sin, then sin would have its way with me. And you remember what James said, right? When lust conceives, it brings forth sin. When it is finished, it brings forth death. Tells me that sin is trying to work something in me. It's trying to accomplish something in me. And it ain't to bring me to the highest heights, but it's to bring me to the lowest low. Are y'all hearing me? The next time you're tempted to sin, you need to understand that the design of that sin is not to bring you to the highest heights, but somehow to get you to the lowest low. Listen to me. Sin waits for an opportunity to take over our lives. You remember what God said to Cain? And when Cain killed Abel, and Cain was around there tripping and all of that, and in Genesis 4:7, God told Cain, if you do well, will you not be accepted? He said, if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. And we need to be transformed so that we can rule over it. Because the picture of sin that God paints here is like a lion crouching in the grasses, just waiting for that prey to make a mistake. Are you with me? And that's what sin does. It is waiting for an opportunity. Not to turn us on, but to string us out. Waiting for an opportunity. And God says you must rule over it. How do you rule over it if I'm a slave to it? You have to be transformed. And when God removes his restraints on a person, man, sin just takes over our life. That's why I say one of the worst things God could have done is to let us just go our way. When God removes the restraints, sin takes over a life. So one of the best things that parents can do is pray for their kids. And booger might be rebelling or whatever, and they ain't living the way you want, and ain't living with God. You got to pray for them because they need your prayer. I remember years ago I told a story of that man who was, he had been in and out of drug rehab all of his adult life, and his mom was a Christian, and she's praying for him, pleading with God. You know what I'm saying? Lord, don't give up on him. Don't let him go. And this man, he ended up in rehab, and he ended up in jail. And one night he went out there, and the judge sent him to rehab or jail. And he went to rehab, but he was so mad because he felt like God would just keep on interfering in his life and getting him back in trouble. And he just wanted to live his life and do his drugs and He went out one night and looked at the sky and said, "Why don't you leave me alone?" And that man, of course, was telling this story after he had been transformed. He said, he screamed that, and he was breathing hard. He said he got quiet, and he just heard in his heart, "I'll leave you alone when your mama leaves me alone." And she was praying for him, right? And she wouldn't stop. One of the best things that a parent can do for a child is to pray for them. But of course, praying for them will be erased in a sense if you don't live before them. Amen? Listen to me. When God removes his restraints, sin takes over our life. I'm so glad that God restrained me from doing everything my heart desired. Romans 1:24 says, of these people that were just trying to get God out of their lives and do whatever they want, and they were denying him and ignoring him, he says what God did is he gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves, that God gave them over to their sins. The worst thing that God could ever do to you is to let you go and do your thing. And I say thank God for not leaving us to our own ways. But instead, he sent Christ to pay the penalty for our sins. And through faith in Christ, he makes us new. 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore, is if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. All things pass away, and all things become new. And so through transformation, right, we begin to reclaim the image of God in our lives. More and more. It should be day by day. The Bible says that our outward man is perishing, but the inward man should be renewed day by day. You ought to look more like Christ today than you did last month. Right? Yes. You're supposed to. You're supposed to be reclaiming the image of God in your life. The closer you get to the finish line, the more you ought to look like Christ. And that takes intention. And that takes, you have to be intentional about that. We're supposed to look more and more like we're supposed to look and think more and more the way we're supposed to. Your thinking ought to be changing. The more the world begins to flex its muscles and think one way, that ought to begin to hit you wrong. Wait a minute, because you're supposed to be thinking more like the kingdom, like God. Because you're being transformed instead of being conformed to the world. Are you with me? Colossians 1:21-22 says, and you who were once alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now he has reconciled in the body of his flesh through death to present you holy and blameless and above reproach in his sight. So you were enemies in your mind. You ought to be thinking differently now. You ought to be on God's side in your mind. If the world says, this behavior is all right with God, you ought to say, well, the Bible says such and such, I'm on God's side. I don't understand I'm a hater. I understand I'm a bigot. I understand that I'm a religious fanatic, but I'm still on God's side because I'm not an enemy anymore in my mind. We're friends now. Are you with me? And in some regards, it comes down to two choices for us in this life. That either we're going to be a friend of God or a friend of the world. And the Bible is very clear that friendship with the world makes us enemies with God. It's your responsibility to be transformed. That is a command of God. Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it is a command. And be transformed by the renewing of your mind. He commands it, right? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove whether they're good and acceptable The perfect will of God. It's not a, if you want to, and my pastor said I need to be transformed. No, God commands you to continue to be transformed, to think more and more in line with Christ, to look more and more like the image that God formed you in originally. He didn't give you Christ so that you could keep looking like you did before. Now remember this, guys. God is the owner. We read in verse 3, the very verse that I really want to focus on. We read in verse 3 that know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that has made us and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Remember this, God is the owner. He is the authority of this world. Now let me just talk about this for a second before we get ready to close. Authority. Let me give you a definition of authority. What is authority? Authority is the right to impose obligations. That's what authority is. I mean, that's what kids were saying, when somebody tells them what to do, they say, you ain't the boss of me. What they're saying is you don't have the right to impose obligations. I mean, they might not be, articulating it in those words or whatever, but that's what they're really saying, right? If somebody, you're on a job and one of your coworkers try to tell you to go do something, you be like, who she is? How's she going to telling me what to do? She ain't my boss. What you're saying is they don't have the right to impose obligations on you. Authority, somebody who has authority has the right to impose, they have the right to obligate you to certain things. If you work for a person and he is a supervisor, that person has the right to impose obligations in regards to that job. God is the authority of the world. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, and all they that dwell therein. He has the right to impose obligations on me, you, and everybody in the world, whether a person walks with him or not. Are you with me? Everybody has a relationship with God. Either it's fixed or it's broken. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Either it's a right relationship in Christ or it's not. Some of us live and people say, essentially saying to God, you ain't the boss of me. Right? I know a guy, he thinks because he don't believe in God, that means that he ain't got to listen. This is still God's world. He is still the authority. Right? Ephesians chapter 2 says this, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus. Why? For good works. When did God design this? That we should walk in it beforehand, right? That God prepared beforehand. God has a right to impose obligations. What is he obligated? He said, I obligated you to do certain good works. That's why that's why you ain't in hell today. That's why I've been merciful to you. Not so you could keep sinning in my face, but so that you could do my good works that I ordained beforehand. I obligate you to do that. And I am the authority of the world, because let me tell you, on Judgment Day, every atheist, agnostic, Buddhist, and everybody else will stand. People are not going to stand before their own, everybody pray to your God. They will stand before the Lord God of heaven and earth, because he is the authority of the world. Are you with me? Buddha will stand before God. Are you understanding me? Muhammad will stand before the God of heaven and earth, which happens to be the God of the Bible. Right? We are the managers. Listen to me carefully. We are obligated to be faithful. We're managers. We're not owners here. God is the owner. You and I are managers. This life he owns. It says that know you that the Lord, he is God. He has made us and not we ourselves. So this life belongs to God. You have the management of it. You can do what you want with it, right? But you can't do what you want with it, and watch this word again, with impunity. In other words, you can't do what you want with it without having a consequence. This is your life. God gives you the life, you run it. He owns it. You're supposed to run it for him. You can come to church with that life, or you can not go to church. You can sleep around with that life. You can do whatever. You can be virtuous with that life. You can be righteous and holy with that life, or you can be a rascal of a sinner with that life. But you need to keep in mind that it ain't yours. It's his. And I say, since I know that it is his life, I won't dare try to run it without his instructions. Oh, you understand what I'm saying? If I try to run this life without his instructions, then I'll be running it sometimes based on how I feel, what the old people say, what the society is saying, what the current mood is, right? But if I run it on his instructions, I know, popular or not, what I do is right. When I worked for Medicaid, when I started working for Medicaid, and I got there, they threw a big old manual on my desk. They said they called it the Medicaid Bible. It said every decision you make is going to be made out of there. You make every decision out of this, and you got right decisions. And I understood that. And people who know me, you know what I did. I started reading. I used to, we ain't had nothing to do. I just sit and I'd be reading policy about this and policy about that. And every now and then we make a decision, reject somebody, didn't approve them, close somebody's case, and they're mad, and they file an appeal. And we have to go before the appeals judge. And guess what the appeals judge used to determine if the decision was right? The manual that they gave me. I never lost an appeal. That's not because I'm great and excellent, but that's because I followed the manual. Are you with me? If you would order your life according to God's word, then your steps would be pleasing to him. Your decisions would be right. Right? You say, what about if his word ain't clear? His word gives you something to do in that faith. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will direct your paths. Are you with me? Right. We are the managers. He obligates us to be faithful. I don't have a choice not to be faithful. I can't take this life and say, well, I'm going to do what I want. This is my life. Everybody got a right to do it. No, everybody got a choice, but it ain't always right. What God obligates you and I to is to his word. He said, study to show yourself approved unto God. He has obligated you to live your life according to his word. As a matter of fact, there's no other way for you to enjoy the fullness of life. Because the principle of God still stands. Man shall not live by bread alone. And Jesus said it stated it in the negative. Deuteronomy stated it in the positive. Said that man lives by every word. Comes out to the same thing. Now let me say a couple more things real quick. He calls you and I and obligates us to be faithful. Some of you sit here today, and some of you listen to my voice and you say, I have faith. I got faith in God. And I want you to understand something about the Hebrews. They did not have a concept. They did not understand a claim to faith apart from faithfulness. Are you hearing what I'm saying? For us, we have faith. I mean, he got faith, but he ain't really faithful. The Hebrews couldn't understand that. If you said you had faith, then what you were saying is, I am faithful. Because faith is not just a word that is empty. It is full of meaning, full of action. Are you with me? They didn't have an understanding of faith without being faithful. And so if you say you have faith, then you are saying that I am faithful. And that's what God obligates us to. And think about when you read Hebrews chapter 11, and it talks about the things that people did by faith. What it's saying is that they were faithful because they had faith, and that's what faith is, being faithful. No such thing as faith without faithful in their understanding, without faithfulness. Formation. He shaped it. He made us. We messed it up. And so he comes back in his grace and transforms us. Kind of like Jeremiah 18, that potter working on that wheel, and it's all messed up. And then he reshapes it into something that he likes. Right? And so God gives us this life, and we start sinning, and our lives are all messed up. Our hearts are all messed up. Our minds, we got all kind of desires inside of us that are just bad, stuff we just can't break out of. Lord, like I said, we can't sing to the Lord, but we can sing the Camel Suit song, right? But we can't sing to Jesus because our hearts are all messed up. And God doesn't say, oh, I'm just going to throw you away. He says, I'll transform you. I'll remake you. I'll shape you, right? I'll get off all of that junk, and I'll make you something that's pleasing to me. Are you with me? And then when you're being transformed, you're being transformed, and you're going through transformation, because I'm still going through it, and every Christian is still going through transformation, right? The old Christian song is, please be patient with me. God is not through with me yet. But it only has meaning if you're really being transformed. And like I said, I need to look and evaluate myself, because I ought to be, like I said, I ought to look more like Christ, today than I did sometime in the past. Because I'm being shaped and conformed more and more into the image of Christ. And then I can look forward to my translation. And the word translation means the movement of something from one place to another. That one day, God is going to take us from eternity, or shall I say from time to eternity. And as a matter of fact, it's eternity that gives meaning to time. The reason why it can be meaningful, your sacrifices can be meaningful, is because there'll be a reward for them in eternity. Your sacrifices in time have meaning because there'll be a reward for them in eternity. Right? If there were no eternity, I was telling the guy, you heard me say before, there's two things that's necessary to have meaning in life: God and eternity. If there ain't no God and there ain't no eternity, there ain't no meaning. He gave his life for this. I hope he enjoyed giving his life, because that's the only reward. The two things that give meaning to life is God and eternity. And God is the one who has made us, and he transforms us and promises us eternity. He promises us eternal life. And that's why Paul says we look not at the things that are seen, but at the things that are not seen. Because the things that are seen are temporal or temporary. Things that are not seen are eternal. I still remember this lady, we were having Bible study, she's going on now. I still remember this, because I'm like, but you got to keep your eye on the prize, on eternity, right? Because let me just tell you what happened. We were talking about heaven and the reward, and she said, I won't wait for the heaven. I want my reward now. And she was very serious. It's like, I want my feeling, I want all this for now, but now she's dead. She's gone to eternity. And so we got to keep our focus and understand that we fight the fight here. We live the life here. We sacrifice here. And God promises us one day that we'll lay all our burdens down, and it'll be joy forever. There's something awaiting the Christian that's far greater than anyone could imagine. I thought it was fitting that we sang the song today, and I didn't pick it. I can only imagine. And our imaginations can't even measure up. Because the Bible says that God is one who can do exceedingly, abundantly, above anything we could ever ask or think. I see that in some sense as saying that, you know what? That God is saying, what I have in store for you, my faithful ones, you can't even imagine it. God describes it in the Bible, and we look in the book of Revelation, and we see it described as streets of gold and rivers of crystal water. But I told you, in some senses, that is what is called accommodation. God is speaking in languages that you and I can understand. Kind of like baby talk, right? You don't talk to the little 2-year-old the way you talk to a 25-year-old. Right? Because, they can't understand. And people, you see you talk, they do, come on, baby, you rub it. And God, he talks baby talk to us. He talks in ways that we can understand. We can understand streets of gold. We can understand crystal clear water. We can understand gates of pearl. But understanding that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above anything we could ask or think tells me that what God really has in store for us, we can't even think about it. We can't even imagine it. We can't even understand. So remember, as a Christian, one who has been transformed through faith in Christ, we are destined for heaven. So be faithful today and know that payday is on the way. Amen? Amen. We'll stop right here.